Rich people, what rich person's habits could you not break no matter how poor you'd become? Story 1. Poverty trauma is real, and my answer is the opposite. There's nothing I wouldn't give up. No matter what, I've still been rehearsing daily how to be poor again. I'm truly. Story 2. No matter how poor you become, people out here talking about name brand ketchup, apples, and hiring movers have a very limited understanding of how poor they can become. I gotta say my answer is that no matter how poor I get, I'm not taking out a predatory loan payday, credit card debt, etc. That's how you bury yourself financially, so that you'll stay poor. Story 3. Hiring a cleaning service for the house and landscapers for outside maintenance. Were I to truly become poor, I would probably end up dropping both, but they would be probably the last things I get rid of: cleaning service first, then landscaper. Story 4. I'd eat bread until I could afford a robot mop vacuum if I was poor. I wouldn't want to go back to regular vacuuming mopping. Same with the robot lawnmower. Both save so much time and keeps everything in great condition. Story 5. If I'm rich, but I do well, if that counts, I'll always spend on premium shoes for daily wear, and I'll never skimp on a mattress. Not that I buy mattresses often, but just saying, investing in both pays dividends down the road. Edit. What the is with all these accounts talking about spending money on things that separate you from the ground? This is overrun with bots. But also, what's their purpose? Weird AF. Story 6. Most people here have no clue what poor actually means. The only answer to this question for someone actually poor is like, I have a choice. I'm in the one of incomes of my country now. However, I grew up in a household where there were months we'd eat bread with sugar for a week because that's all we could afford. I grew up feeling guilty for my parents' debts when they bought me a Christmas present worth a few euros because I knew that money would be better spent. If you have nothing to spend, the only thing you care about is surviving to another paycheck and hoping nothing happens that will cost money. Story 7. Rich people are usually the tightest of tightwads. They budget extremely tight, and they still put money into investments. I would go without many things before I gave up investing, even if I only could invest $10 a week. Story 8. Far from rich, but you can pry my Spotify subscription from my cold dead hands. Everything else I can survive without or sail the seas, so guess Spotify and unlimited bandwidth internet. Story 9. I wouldn't say we're rich, but we like to buy used vehicles, and we pay cash. That being said, the newest vehicle we own is a 2017 which we just purchased for the mister. I drive a 2013. Story 10. None. I think I've been dirt poor before. I could lose it all again. Professional movers, first class flying, 500 dinners. Yeah, it's all nice, but I lived without them once and I could do so again. Story 11. Having a housekeeper cleaning company. I can make more than what they cost in about 15 minutes, and it's hours my wife and I can spend working or doing something more productive. I'm also not rich. Edit. My hourly rate is about 4 to 6 times theirs, depending. Poorly worded on my part. Story 12. Living below my means. It's an oversimplification, but living below your means for many decades is the surest path to wealth outside of being wealthy at birth. If I were suddenly making $30,000 a year, I'd rent out my house and move in with my parents or in-laws and cut the vast majority of my expenses. Story 13. Flying business or first class on long-haul flights. If I'm too poor to fly, that's okay. I just can't go back. The idea of a 6 to 14-hour flight in economy sounds like after I've been shown the other side. Story 14. My skincare and makeup, which isn't elaborate. 32 for face wash that lasts forever. 24 for moisturizer which lasts forever. Both a little goes a long way. 19 and $6 serums both go a long way. For makeup wipes, 12 mascara, 12 concealer, 36 pore primer, 48 Laura Mercier translucent setting powder, 54 Dr. Jart Tiger Grass color treatment. Don't wear makeup often so lasts long time. Oh, and my dry shampoo which is 12. You can buy smaller of each which would be less upfront. Eek this way less expensive than rich people spend. Oh. Story 15. Having a block of good Parmesan cheese in the fridge instead of the green can. Also the fancy list coffee, sourdough bread, eggs with the thick orange yolks. Story 16. As a homeowner and someone who worked as a mover during a summer in college, please tip these dudes. In 2014 I was making 11 hours. I probably doubled my income because of cash tips. I have moved myself and others too many times to not use movers in the future. Story 17. Relatively well off here. I will never wear AliExpress 1000 poly bullshit. I can hit the thrift store and get some good condition Gap for 5 polyester. Senators. Once you buy a senator, you can't go back to simple congressman. I am still angry I can't buy a president at the current market rate, but fingers crossed. Story 18. Not rich, but I grew up with rich people. I would never sleep on polyester sheets. They have to be 100 cotton, and the higher the thread count the better. All of my pots and pans are all clad copper core. I would never ever cook with Teflon. I would never wear socks that were not at least 95 cotton, and the same goes for my kids' socks. I usually pay top dollar for honey and olive oil. I avoid supermarket meat unless I absolutely have to, and only buy from a butcher. I would never wait in a long line for something free, like a pop-up that gave free samples. My time is too expensive for that. I don't like waiting in lines in general. I would rather donate something rather than spend time and effort listing it and shipping it if I'm not making more than 20 on it. I will never eat raw fish, unless the restaurant is extremely expensive. There are probably a few more that I'm forgetting, but those are just a few things off the top of my head. Story 19. I'm not rich, but I'm never patching medium to large areas of drywall ever again. Professional drywall workers are artisan alchemist magician wizards, and they have my utmost respect. Story 20 I not sure rich people scroll Reddit. LOL yet, I would say having a selection of cheeses and meats to make sandwiches from, I don't think I could go back to just eating Kraft singles and prepackaged Oscar Mayer sliced meats. Story 21 I got rich selling a few software companies. I think my take is almost opposite of what ID have thought previously. 1. I took time off to build a house. I am not qualified to do that, so there is both massive risk of needing to spend money to fix my UPS and the time required to do something I don't know how to do while not making money learning it. So, what ID really hope to never give up is the sort of reckless financial approach to doing things in the DIY world. I love tinkering, but you don't tinker with your car if you can't afford to trash and replace it. ID like to think ID continue to trust in my ability to solve things because the reality is that it's almost always been more cost-effective to go DIY assuming you have sufficient time around you making money to live off job. 2. Eat whole, great food. In many ways access to money means you get higher quality ingredient food that isn't massively processed. It's a value of great chefs and amazing stores. ID like to think that ID continue to eat out of the garden, and prioritize healthy delicious whole foods instead of the cost per calorie favorites. This would have limits on the how poor you become spectrum, but ID take it further into the not rich realm than I would have done the opposite as I gained wealth. Tastes better, better for me, better for planet. 3. Be radically interested in the success of others. Being comfortable means you have emotional energy to think about others and the world around you. It also turns out to be a great strategy for selfish reasons. Helping people is good, feels good, and I believe thoroughly in it being an investment in your own resilience over the long run. Story 22 I'm not rich per se, but definitely not as poor as I used to be. Paper towels, I don't know how I lived without them, especially quality ones like Bounty. They make life so much easier in so many ways. Expensive, yes. Worth it, yes. Story 23 I think most people here haven't been either wealthy or poor. I've been so poor I went hungry and couldn't pay rent, couldn't afford a cell phone or TV, was close to being homeless, only had electric and water because they couldn't cut it off, and now I'm fairly well off, could use skipping a meal or less phone TV time for sure. I wouldn't give up getting outside and walking, seeing the world for what it is. When I was poor I had to walk 6 miles RT to LIDL to buy the cheapest bread and beans I could find. Now I hike in the park, but it's the same park and the same sky and the same sun. Never forget that. Everything else is material bullshit. Story 24 As a person who's not as financially successful as their parents, I remain loyal to several consumer products and would have to be really strapped to go generic. I may not have much, but I use brand name trash bags and dish soap, and there's always Heinz ketchup in the fridge. I also never skimp on heating and cooling, though I do all I can to insulate well and dress appropriately to minimize the bill. In my poorest years I gave up a lot of luxuries and some necessities to keep my living space at a comfortable temperature. Story 25 I do not pay attention to prices when I buy groceries. I pick out what I want and whatever it costs is what it costs. I'm willing to budget some things, but not that. Story 26 Expensive toilet paper. There's no way my precious but is touching anything lower than 4-ply for longer than a day. My butt has become so coddled to good TP that it gets irritated after only 2 straight days of normal TP. Story 27 Not really rich, but there's no way and I'm picking at a rotisserie chicken for a week straight private health insurance. ID beg borrow steal to get private health insurance. Story 28 Not even a rich thing but a yard service. I live in Florida. I'm not doing it myself. Mortgage, grocery bill, yard service. That's the order of priority. ID ride a bus and have no internet before I cancel the yard guys. And I know some folks get satisfaction from doing it themselves, even if they could pay a service. Good for them, not me. Story 29 Being well dressed, or at least smart looking. Looking smart makes a huge impact on how one feels and has a huge impact on how others treat you in almost every situation. It's also relatively cheap to look well presented. You can buy cheap well-fitting clothes and always look half decent even if you can't afford designer. Story 30 I grew up poor and am now relatively rich, and I kept thinking what would I not give up if I didn't have enough to eat. I can't think of a single thing. I'd be sad to let some of my little luxuries go, but there's not a thing I wouldn't do to not be hungry again. Story 31 I sorted by top and looked at the first 50 posts. Not a single post from an actual rich person talking about an actual rich person's habit. Not one. Just 50 posts of regular people saying stuff like, oh man, I could never go back to store brand butter, or whatever the. Story 32 My easily disprovable notion that my ideas have more merit than do those of most other people. This is known clinically as Trump disorder, to the best of my knowledge. Story 33 ID never put myself into an impossible to get out of credit card debt again. These new rates at 30 are absolutely insane. You'd never pay off anything except for interest each month forever. I feel bad for anyone who gets into that trap. Story 34 Purchasing high-quality toilet paper. College me felt so overjoyed when the janitorial service handed out free rolls of the crappy 1-ply stuff because someone ordered the wrong type and it couldn't be returned yada yada yada. Now no way, I would find a way to get that premium level stuff. Story 35 Going to therapy. There are options, even in the US, for those who can't afford private therapy at cost. And it saved my life, rich or poor. I'd give up pretty much anything else before cutting out therapy. Story 36 I've never been poor, but I did grow up broke. For anyone that doesn't understand, broke means you have the basic necessities, but almost never have money for anything else and you're living paycheck to paycheck, stressing about what could happen, and you're deeply in debt and constantly worried about that, and so on. My mom was a great mom. She busted her to provide for me, and even managed to teach me some really important life lessons along the way. I'm glad I grew up this way, because it made me independent and highly suspect of just about everything that seems too easy, etc. That said, many years later, I've been pretty fortunate and successful. My wife has been even more successful, and we've built a pretty good life. I still try to impart the stuff I learned when I was younger, and she does too. She grew up flat out poor, so it's a whole other level of trauma. But I have absolutely become a bougie materialistic suburbanite, and you'll be damned if you will ever get me to give up my Costco executive membership. You can pry it from my cold, dead upper middle class, which doesn't exist. We're all wage slaves, slightly dry because I don't lotion enough hands. Story 37. I don't think I can be classed as rich, but the mindset to set aside money for savings, or doing quick maths for how many months' work something is, to figure out if I can afford to just buy it now, or if I have to wait and save up. I know that the people are vetted first, but watching any of Caleb Hammer's financial audits on YouTube, it's very scary how many people are in staggering debt and are essentially paycheck to paycheck because of their debt. Story 38. You have to break them. You can't afford them anymore. There is nothing I did when I was wealthy that I can still afford to do sometimes, to include eating. Story 39. Gotta love the out-of-touch rich folks that don't know the difference between a habit and a purchase. I'm not rich, but I'm better off than most of my friends. Hey Ray, some actual answers. Physical fitness. I've spent enough time training that I could do a kinesthetics program, even if I needed to sell all of my workout gear. If I was in a rough spot where I could only afford or only had time for fast food, I would still track macros and select the menu items that would best meet my goals. Learning how to do this takes time and money, but the learned habit can stick with you without needing to spend any extra money. Hosting social events. Even if I could no longer afford to provide food and drinks, I would still try to invite friends over regularly, and rely on cheap free forms of entertainment to do so. Not having money can be extremely alienating, and I will never again allow myself to isolate from the world until things are better. Life's too short, paying people their worth. I absolutely loathe haggling over prices. I find it rude and presumptuous to think that I should get some sort of special deal in any exchange. I'll pay the price that was given to me, and if I can't afford it then I simply won't purchase it. Story 40. I'm not rich, but I have more money than I've ever had, and I'm realizing I've developed a habit I really need to break. Our living room TV stopped working, so we just moved our bedroom TV into the living room, but my immediate knee reaction was, let's go buy a new TV. Can we afford it? Yes. Is it necessary? No. So we decided against getting another TV, but I absolutely promise when my husband gets paid on Wednesday he's going to want to get a new TV. Story 41. Washing my hands. One of the most impactful things I see in unhoused people is how dirty their hands become. I'm not exactly germophobic, but I'm educated enough to be germo-biased. It's not a habit for the sake of compulsion or vanity, it's a priority I would cling to for my own health's sake. Story 42. The rich people things I do are to buy time because I can make more money working than cleaning my house or doing laundry. If I didn't have money, I'd just do it all myself again, since I'd probably have time. Story 43. I'm pretty sure I qualify as rich based on scanning the posts. Married with about $800K in W-2 earnings, 2 kids, East Coast metro area. Hey Race, a recent move I pulled on the car buying front. I decided to buy a Toyota Land Cruiser to get ahead of the possible tariffs, giving my 16YO, our 2019 4Runner, so needed a new car. Was all set to pay cash for the 70K vehicle, but they offered 4.9 financing, so I took it and invested the 70K in GLD Gold ETF, knowing that market chaos was coming. Gold is almost always a good bet. I made give or take $7,500 over the past 3 to 4 weeks, which is more than the interest on the 3-year car loan. I grew up middle class, and my parents wouldn't have done any of the above. Story 44. From a truly poor 32-year-old who's never been wealthy, well-off, or rich, I've come to realize that it's important to still do the things you want with your money regardless of how dumb it might seem for your tax bracket. I'm not talking about financing cars or anything here, but saving and spending $400 to $500 on something like a piece of jewelry, or some really nice boots or clothing now and again makes me feel semi-normal and look good. Honestly, it's probably not actually keeping me from buying a house or retiring like many older people would say. The reason it's not keeping me from that stuff is because you'll never be able to afford buying a house or retiring. Treat yourself, I guess. Story 45. If rich Western living standards, then safe drinkable water on the tap, ventilated housing without mold. My lungs are useful to me. Access to basic healthcare so I don't die or suffer from preventable or curable complications or diseases. Good shoes, pressure cooker, solid tool screwdrivers and whatnot. Hiring an electrician, so I don't die in a house fire. Hiring a plumber, so there's no water leaking in the walls. Story 46. Not rich, but I'm upper middle, I'd say dogs, or a pet at least. It's not something I could see myself giving up after suddenly becoming less fortunate. I would do what it takes to make sure I had enough to feed and take care of them, including necessary vet expenses. And I did have a dog, still do, same one, shortly after getting my bachelor's, which was still several years before landing a job in my field. In the meantime, I was a server at a restaurant part-time, which was my only income. Of course, if I was less fortunate, I may not go out and splurge and get a pet I did not already have, but I would not surrender one I've already committed to. Story 47. My parents were rich, not me, but it was so nice to be able to just grab what you wanted when you went shopping, not look at a price. Me nowadays, however, I get the cheapest of everything in budget. Story 48. When losing income, there are some things you just can't get past because of the expense. Here's an example: plane flights. Regular seat 500, highly flexible. You can spend a bit less if you really want to scrunch down on the cost. First class 1,000, charter a plane 2,000 an hour. Seat 6 to 10 timeshare on a jet 350,000, plus 50 hours per year of flight time at 2,000 hour. Jet lease or ownership. How much do you want to spend? Some of those costs are just outside the realm of people who don't have portfolios, not in the millions of dollars. Story 49. I am not rich, but also not poor. I would never go on a holiday, where I have to think about every little amount I have to spend. A holiday is to relax and have fun. If the money for that is not available, I would rather stay at home and spend what money there is differently. So many people search for the cheapest flight, the cheapest hotel without even an own bathroom, try to spend as little as possible on food, all that for what? Just to be in another country. Instead of going once a year, better go once every 2 years, and have a little more funds available. Story 50. Valuing time. Once you become rich, time becomes a currency, and assuming I didn't want to stay poor, I'd be working my off to deliver value to society again, and to do this, you need to value time. Story 51. Certain poor people habits can make or keep you rich. Not every poor people are financially illiterate. Sometimes they really don't have the time, money, and energy besides surviving. Sometimes getting a little less poor can also be a huge achievement, it's just not that visible. Story 52. I make close to 200K and feel poor with all the things people can't give up. I could never afford any of that in the first place. I am in SoCal, so that's part of it, but... Story 53. Charmin Ultra Toilet Paper. I will eat beans and rice, but am never doing cheap toilet paper. Yes, I grew up with a good toilet paper, but I did suffer during college, so I do know what horrible cheap toilet paper is like. It sucks, and am aware how ridiculous this is, but it's the truth. Story 54. Not rich, but we make about 4x the median income in our city. I will always go to the doctor and dentist every 6 months. You're only given one body, one set of teeth, and the misery I've seen due to ignoring healthcare maintenance is horrifying. I've done this even when I was making $8 an hour with no health insurance. Put all my doctor, dentist, and therapy appointments on my credit card. No regrets. Take care of yourself, folks. Story 55. None. I've discovered that I really don't need much to be happy. I need food, water, heat, internet, gaming PC. That's all I need, so I guess internet or gaming PC, probably gaming PC because of the... Story 56. Not rich. Having to use margarine in place of butter. I will eat the dead rat I found in my alley sautéed in butter before I eat a steak cooked in margarine. Edit hyperbole, or S, but you get my drift. Margarine is garbage. Story 57. My cousin went from rich to poor. She still doesn't cook. She will spend her last dime buying pre-made. She also refuses to wear clothes more than one season and will buy cheap shitty clothes to replace things each season. Story 58. Buying food. I came from a place with an outdoor market culture, no supermarket, so you have to look at the street vendor, then look at your dad, and if he tilts his head you don't get to ask for that food. I work like a dog now, but I get to buy so much good food, I am very happy. Story 59. Eating 3 meals a day would be a hard one to quit. I'm not rich, but there was a time in my life where I lived off 1 meal a day, feasting on scraps. I don't see myself able to go back to that. But who knows, when push comes to shove, people do desperate things to survive, so who knows. Story 60. The number of people in this thread who don't understand what poor means is frightening. People talking about giving up their lawn care services last, or robot mops, etc. Poor is living in your car, if you are lucky enough to have one, or in a tent on the sidewalk or in some park, you don't have a lawn to mow or a floor to mop. Story 61. Maintaining my car meticulously. I borrowed a buddy's car the other day that had a broken gas gauge, sagging roof liner, no wiper fluid, and no AC. I wouldn't be willing to live like that again. Story 62. Grew up in a middle-class family that gradually became wealthier. I've stayed surprisingly frugal on most things, but have come to appreciate the value of paying a bit of a premium for the healthiest possible diet. Maintaining a decent amount of beef, eggs, fish in my diet hasn't always been the kindest to the wallet, nor is focusing on organic products. Every so often though I bite the bullet and buy some processed for nostalgia's sake. I can only do salmon and kale over quinoa and the like for so long before I begin to rumble for a cheeseburger in paradise.
Long live the Irish clown and his friends.
Story 63. I'm totally dependent on the people who cook and clean for me. Couldn't do it. It's not because I look down on menial work, but rather the opposite. I can't fathom how other people have so much energy for everyday tasks. To me, they are genetically superior. I wouldn't survive out there. Had I been born poor, I'd be 100 homeless. I try to treat the people around me accordingly. They make my life bearable. Story 64. Not going out to eat for lunch during work. I'll always bring food from home. I have coworkers who have needed personal loans from their boss, my husband, to help pay for their life expenses like cars, housing, and daycare, but they also go out to eat for lunch multiple times a week. It actually irritates me. I have been poor even on food stamps for a few months, and when I was at my poorest, I would cut any unnecessary cost to save money. That's just what you do when you're poor. You can't simply buy stuff or eat what you want. So seeing people who clearly don't have a lot of money continue to spend unnecessary funds when they really should be saving it for other financial areas just bugs me, since I have been on that income level too. But I always sacrificed and was able to eat and have a roof over my head without ever completely running out of money to ask people for personal loans. Story 65. Not rich, but I will take my overpriced bidet with me and have the cushiest toilet in the shittiest apartment, instant warm water, warmed seat, night light, UV self-cleaning, and blow dryer. Story 66. Tide, and if I'm not too poor, Charmin, fruits and veggies, basics for kids so they don't look or feel poor, nicer housing, car etc. negotiable, healthcare ID. Try to keep having some insurance. I don't know how hard it is to navigate Medicaid. Story 67. I live on a remote-ish island and do pretty well for myself. No matter what my financial situation is, will freeze over before I take the overnight ferry without a cabin. Story 68. My time is now more valuable than what a lot of things services cost. House cleaner, yard maintenance, servicing my vehicle, will always pay for these services to buy my free time on the weekends. No longer spend time trying to DIY, just pay someone and spend the Saturday with my wife and daughter. Story 69. Negotiating bills. Especially when a new customer promotion comes up, it's much easier for a company to retain a customer than lose them altogether. Story 70. Buying Kleenex over using toilet tissue. I grew up poor and don't ever remember having a box of Kleenex. I knew I had made it when I could afford Kleenex, as silly as that seems. Story 71. Good furniture. With this said, I am steady middle class. Almost all of my furniture has come from thrift stores, estate sales and the curb, but is all sturdy real. I'm not buying a shitty particle board bookcase from Walmart. You get what you pay for. The thought of using that little weird IKEA wrench to put something together pains me. Story 72. Not rich, but fairly well off. High quality shoes, sunglasses and mattress. I'm not talking whatever the shoes are with the red soles, but well-made dress or work boots. Same for sunglasses, Randolph Engineering or American Optical. The only rich person thing we have is someone to clean the house once a week. Floors, bathrooms and dusting. Once every 6 months we will have them do a hardcore deep clean. I enjoy cooking so I will never let that go. Same for laundry and ironing. It's insanely therapeutic for me. Story 73. If I'm rich, we have enough money that last week our financial advisor offered to fly from the States to England to meet with us. Instead of doing a Zoom meeting, the offer was declined, but we have had them fly to meet us when we still lived in the States. I would never go back to buying fast fashion. I'd rather have one well-made dress that lasts 1,000 washes than 100 cheap pieces that fall apart. I definitely think that if we were broke tomorrow I could continue this habit with careful budgeting. I don't care about having a new outfit every week. I care about the clothing I have being good quality and well-fitting. Story 74. I'm out of poor and I will never buy very cheap shoes. Not even cheapish ones. Bought 3 shoes for $450 because the comfort is huge. I like to walk now and don't have issues anymore, but I also weight 118 kg. Story 75. I have cleaners come every week. It takes 3 of them to fully clean my house in 2 to 3 hours. If I attempted to do as good of a job as they do, it would take me a full workday. Totally worth having them come. Story 76. I honestly would not be able to shop for clothes or have an idea. Having my family's stylist come is very convenient, especially if I want something very specific.